Hey everybody, my name is Brendan Noble. I'm a young adult author. Welcome again to my Slavic Saturday series where we talk about Slavic history, mythology, and folklore. And happy 4th of July or Independence Day to everyone who's in the United States. Just as a quick update, I do a lot of these series because I'm working on a Slavic fantasy series and I'm also 50% Polish, so a lot of these stories are fun and interesting to me. This week I announced the name of the first book in my Slavic fantasy series, which is A Dagger in the Winds. If you want to click on the link down in the description below, you can see the article and video in which I talk about that more. But this week, on Slavic Saturday, we're talking about two generals that played an important part in the American Revolution, and they were both who were both born in Poland. And I think it would be kind of fun to talk about this because often the Slavs hadn't really come to the United States this early, very in large numbers. But the fact that two generals played a very large part in the war is kind of a fun thing to talk about on the 4th of July. So the two I'm going to be talking about are Casimir Pulaski and Tadeusz Kościuszko. I might not be pronouncing the second name correct. It's very Polish, and I'm trying my best. Pulaski you've probably heard of. Kociuszko you may have not. But we'll start with Pulaski and kind of go over some of the history that he was involved in with the American Revolution. If you want more details, you can also click on the link in the description below. My post goes into a little bit more depth than I can go into in the video. So Pulaski was a Polish aristocrat. He was born around Warsaw, and he studied as a general. He was part of the Polish military and aristocracy at the time, which was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But during his life, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had become under a lot of control of Russia. It basically become a puppet state. And so when yet another king was elected, but was basically chosen by Russia, Casimir Pulaski and another group of aristocrats formed the Confederation of Bar. They revolted against Russia, and while Pulaski led a cavalry division and was very successful, they eventually were defeated, and Pulaski fled to France after the war because it came even more under Russian control. Poland and Lithuania were partitioned between Russia and a few other countries, including Austria. Now, this is important because Casimir Pulaski meets Benjamin Franklin in Paris around 1777. Benjamin Franklin was looking to gain support from France in Paris during the time. And while there are a lot of European generals who often were failed generals who were looking to go to America to prove themselves in the war, Pulaski had gained a name for himself as his desire for independence, but also his skill, especially with cavalry. So Franklin accepted his bid to try to go to America to help out the war effort, and France actually funded the travel because he was such a rabble-rouser and he often was incredibly arrogant that they just wanted him out of the country. Remember, France was still a monarchy at this time. So Pulaski quickly goes to America, and he instantly doesn't take the time to go to the Continental Congress and ask to become a general. He goes directly to Washington. Washington tells him he has to go to the Continental Congress, but Pulaski is Pulaski. He ignores it, and so he goes with Washington to the Battle of Brandywine. And Pulaski wasn't allowed to lead during this battle, but he's with Washington, and when they see that their right flank is given during the battle and that they're forced to retreat, but this potentially could lead to the defeat of the entire army and the routing of the entire army and even Washington's death. They're getting flanked this badly. Pulaski pleads with Washington to give him control over his 30 cavalrymen that guard Washington directly so that he can countercharge the British forces and give them enough time to retreat safely. Washington doesn't really have a choice. He might die if this fails, so he gives Pulaski the cavalry. Pulaski, with only those 30 men, manages to hold off the British long enough for the Americans to retreat, and he's kind of hailed today as being able to save Washington's life because of that. The Continental Congress then directly gives him the status of brigadier general, and he goes on for a little bit of a period with just having small cavalry units within the army, but between his arrogance and not getting along with a lot of the other generals, he forms eventually his own independent cavalry division, the first in the United States history, that was based off the Polish winged hussars. And so it was a very effective and powerful unit, and it was praised as being very much such for the army. But Pulaski was known to be somewhat reckless. Because he didn't get along with eventually even Washington, he got sent south and to South Carolina and Georgia and participated in wars in some of the battles away from Washington. And during this time, he was kind of known to charge again recklessly, and one of these charges led to him getting shot in the chest, and he died later on the last day of the siege of Savannah. And so while he died earlier in the war, he helped turn a lot of the battles. He saved Washington's life, and he is considered the father of American cavalry because of his efforts. And he's even remembered today by celebrations in Chicago, Grand Rapids, and a few other cities in the Midwest that have some Polish heritage because of all he accomplished. Now, Tadeusz Kościuszko was born in what is kind of known, it would be known as Belarus today. It was still under the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth at the time. And then he went to study in Warsaw and then Paris to become a general. And he eventually became a tutor and for a general's daughter. He eventually tried to elope with her. It didn't go well, and he fled to the United States. And he met Benjamin Franklin in the United States, which is kind of interesting that the stories both start with Benjamin Franklin. And he joined the American Army. During this time, he wasn't considered as well known as Pulaski, so he's just joined as a normal engineer. But during his time as an engineer, he kind of gained some reputation as some small battles of knowing where to place defenses. And in 1777, Kociuszko was in the Fort Ticonderoga and helping defend that. And he had the idea of, after surveying the fort, that they should place a battery higher on the hills to protect the fort just in case of an attack. They didn't listen to him, and his fears came true when the British attacked. The fort fell. And he was actually put in charge then, because they noticed that he was actually right, of making sure that the British, as the Americans retreated, didn't catch the American troops. And through his engineering skill, he came up with the ideas of downing trees, blocking rivers, and destroying roads and bridges. That because the British had such a long supply line, he managed to ravage that and give the Americans enough time to get away and into safety. So despite them not listening to him, they gave in the end, and he was very much recognized for this. And over the next few years, he continued with Major General Horatio Gates and becoming a huge member of his engineering team. And he eventually became the chief of the engineering corps of the American Army, which is an incredibly significant position. He was so recognized that he was put in charge of helping determine the defenses of West Point, which you might know today is still the Army's training grounds. And so he was considered incredibly innovative with some of the defenses he put up there. As the chief of the engineering corps, went south with the generals down to figure out the final battles of the war. Helping win the Battle of Saratoga by sending up some of the defenses down there. And then also made multiple other points. Some of the generals, even in their letters, mentioned that there's a young Polish immigrant that had helped win many battles in the war. So he made a very big impact. But after the war, he was recognized as a U.S. citizen and became a brigadier general as an honorary term. But he wanted to. Poland at this time after Pulaski and the Confederation of Bars War was controlled by Russia and multiple other countries. He wanted to go back and help try to free Poland. So Kociuszko went back to Poland. It took him a long time. The American Congress had not paid the generals very well at that time, or the normal soldiers, so he received almost no pay. He was in poverty for 5 years. He eventually managed to convince someone to give him a general position in Poland. He used that, teamed up with a lot of other guys, tried to revolt against Russia and gain Polish independence. They failed there, and he came back to the United States again, was welcomed as a hero by Jefferson and others, and helped continue the efforts here. But I think there's kind of an interesting story here where both Pulaski and Kociuszko had a country in which they were fighting for freedom in Poland against Russian and other oppressors, in which they couldn't have freedom for their own country, but they were coming to America to fight for freedom here. And there's some type of very fascinating element that these guys couldn't have that freedom, but were willing to help fight for it for other people. And I think that's really important that they're remembered because of the sacrifice they went through for their own country, but also what they did for the United States. As some of the first real Slavs that come to the United States. There was not a large Polish immigration until the late 1800s and early 1900s. So they were some of the first, and they made a major impact. And I hope that we can remember them on days like today, and as we celebrate our independence. So that's all I have for my Slavic Saturday series today. I hope you guys all have a happy 4th of July, or if you're in another country, you just have a happy Saturday. Remember, if you always like these videos, please like and subscribe down below. I come out with these videos every Saturday and talk about a variety of topics. Well, I'll see you guys all next week, and I hope you enjoy your weekend.